So I recently installed new frets in this fretboard. Um, this was a guitar that I built. The neck was just a cheap neck off of an Ibanez Geo guitar that I paid like $75 Canadian for, used. And It was a nice neck to play. The shape of it was really nice, but the frets were small, really hard, and they weren't even. So it had lots of dead spots in it all along the neck, especially up high when you were trying to bend the first three strings. They would just fret out. I tried leveling it once, and I still didn't get it level, and I was getting down to where there was hardly any frets left. They were getting so small. It was hard to get underneath them to bend. So I scalloped the fretboard from 12 up to 22 to help with that, because this is just a cheap neck. I'm thinking, well, what the hell, what do I care? If I wreck it, I wreck it. I don't care. I'll just find another one. But I scalloped it, and that helped a little bit with getting underneath the strings, but they still fretted out all the time. It was a nice guitar to play. I loved playing this guitar. It's very small. I can't hardly go back to playing a regular style guitar. I don't know why guitars were ever, especially electrics, I have no idea why the bodies were ever made so big on them. You don't need this huge body. This thing is small, compact. I can sit in a chair, I can sit on the couch. So this became my favorite guitar to play, except that the neck sucked. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try refretting it. And I was originally going to make a video about that refretting process, and then I thought, well, what's the point? There's already tons of videos on YouTube about refretting, how to do it and the process and everything, so what am I really adding by showing me doing it? And then I thought afterwards, well, you know what, maybe I could show what might be interesting to some people is the tools that I used, because I had some tools on hand, and I made some tools rather than going out and spending a whole bunch of money. On StewMac, a complete kit with all the files and the saws and the nut saws and fret files and everything is $400 US. Now that's 4 times what this guitar is worth. So I wasn't about to go down that route. Buying the individual components, file, tools that I thought I really needed was still pretty expensive. A beveling file to go along and put the bevels on the edge and to flatten the frets on the outside was like $60 US. Nut files, a kit to do all the nuts, is like $95 US. Crowning files for doing the frets, $60 to $90, and a fret saw for cleaning out the slots in the neck, $60. So even doing that, you're still looking at over $300 US, which converted into Canadian is like $350 or $375 plus shipping. You're still close to $400. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to do it as cheap as I can, and let's see how it works. So to start with, I needed to know what frets to order. So I pulled out one fret out of the fretboard and measured it. And then I went on to Amazon and I found new frets, a jumbo. I went way up on size. You needed to measure the tang that goes down inside so that you got the right size for your slots. That was the key thing. But I went with the biggest frets that I could find that fit that fret slot. So they were $30 Canadian delivered from Amazon. So that was a very minor expense. For a fret saw, I got this off of Amazon too. It's called a Zona. And these were available in different kerfs, different thicknesses of blades. The slots, the tangs on mine were 0.025 thick, and this one is an 020 kerf. So that was pretty much perfect. I used it to clean out and deepen the slots a little bit after I leveled the fretboard Excel. So that was tool number one, and this cost $24. So it was this same I think almost exact same saw on StewMac was $60, but it was $24 on Amazon. For leveling the fretboard, I have a 3D printer, so I 3D printed a leveling board. It's got a 14-inch radius, which matches the original radius on the fretboard. I printed it could have been printed in one setting. I printed it in two just because it's, I find when I'm printing that's a better way to do things, is to print things in two and stick them together. There's less chance of the print screwing up. That's the big thing. And plus I don't have to leave it running overnight. Something like this might take 10 hours or something to print. Well, I can put it on in the morning while I'm here to watch it, and I can print it over 2 days, and then I print a section that went in the middle, and I heat them together and melt them together. So that one I could just put on some sandpaper, and I used that to level out the fretboard and not lose the 14-inch radius on the fretboard. Once I cleaned my slots out with the file, I printed out again. I printed out a couple of tools again with the proper radius on them. These I used to press the frets into the neck. I would start them just by tapping them with a dead blow hammer, and then I would take them over to the drill press where I had supported the neck, and I could just set this block on top and push down and push the frets into the neck. So I used the wide one for most of the frets, and then once I got to the very high up on the neck where there wasn't space between the frets for the wide one, I switched to the narrow one. So again, I printed these off on a 3D printer. You know, there's the 50 cents or $1 worth of plastic in those. Once they were in, I went down to my local hardware store, and this was a chainsaw file which had a handle on it. It was like $9 Canadian. I cut the handle off, and again I printed up a holder. You know, you could make this out of wood. Someone with some basic hand tools could make this out of wood. For me, it's just easier to print them out on the 3D printer. But it holds the file at a 90-degree angle, and you're able to run that up and down the fretboard, and that files the ends of the frets down so that they're nice, and you can get them quite close to the side of the fretboard. Then you can take the file out and just slide it in to the other side, which put a 35-degree angle on the frets. I'd actually printed up spots where you could put screws in here to clamp it, but it didn't need them. It was so tight once you got it in here, all you had to do is push it in, and a little bit when you were holding on to it, you're also adding some pressure, and that was enough to hold the file in place. I didn't have a problem with that. So once those frets were fairly close to the edge of the fretboard, I had a set of these diamond coated files that I had bought years ago for something else. So again, they were cheap, $6 or something from my local Princess Auto, which is sort of like a Harbor Freight. So I had those, so I just used the diamond file to, you could very accurately, you know, round the ends of those frets off without jabbing in and scarring up the side of the fretboard. So that got those down to the basic shape. And then from there, this is a fishhook file, that's diamond coated again, and it's very fine. This is a little coarser, this one is very fine. So with this one I was able to round everything off and smooth everything out. So there was another thing that I already had, and if you had to buy one of those, it's $5 or something like that. Then when it came to crowning, crowning files from Stu Mac are like $60 to $90. That beveling file, this thing from Stu Mac is like $60 US. Crowning files are $60 to $90. I tried printing one off. I tried printing this off with a channel inside of it to fit over top of the frets when you were to round them, and it didn't really work very well. So I saw a video online where someone made something like this out of wood, and you just stick on some sandpaper, and then you can hold that at, that's a 45-degree angle, and you can start your rounding off your frets. If this was your fret and it's flat from the leveling process, you can start getting it going at 45 degrees, and then you can just slowly round it as you go, and give yourself, and do it from the other side and give it a round profile. So that worked really well. And again, that was just a little bit of plastic. And again, the original video I saw on YouTube, they just made this out of a piece of 3/4 inch MDF or something, and they just cut that shape out. So the one thing that was left to do, I bought a Graphtec nut, and it was much too tall. So I started by sanding the bottom of it and getting it down to a reasonable height, but it would be very hard, I think, to get all of your heights on your strings perfect using that method. So I got my nut height close by sanding the bottom of the nut on a sanding beam, but then to get the individual string heights to the correct height, then I used a combination. Again, I had this little file that came to a 3-sided file that came to a point, and I had a set of these little files. Again, I had picked these up somewhere for dirt cheap. They're made in China, obviously, and they have a couple of files here that were very sharp at the bottom. So I was able to use those to just lightly file the string slots down and get the strings to the perfect height in the nut. Now again, proper nut files, a set of them, are $100 US. These were, again, $6 or something like that. You know, and you read on the forums that some people make a big deal about the fact that the nut should be the exact same width as the string and yada yada. I don't know. Maybe for a professional guitar player, it would make a difference. You know, it seemed maybe the slots on the fine on the E string and the B string were maybe a little bit wider than the actual string itself. It didn't seem to make any difference to me. I don't know. So that's about it. That was the tooling that I used. I would also add in that if you take your guitar somewhere to get it refretted, it's very expensive, and I can see why. It is tedious and demanding work, and I certainly wouldn't recommend trying it yourself on an expensive guitar. If I had a guitar that was worth some money, I wouldn't even think about doing it myself. I would try and find the best luthier in your city that you could take it to, and I would get it done properly and pay the price, because it's just a lot of work, and it's easy to screw something up at the end that kind of destroys all your work up to that point. So on my guitar, who cares? $75 neck. I can go buy another Ibanez Geo off of the Craigslist, or we have something called Kijiji up here in Canada. I could go find another one for $100 and take the neck off of it, or I could maybe even find a better quality neck off of another Ibanez to put on. That was what I was originally going to do, was try and find something off of an RG or something like that, and just swap the whole neck out. And then I just thought, well, you know what, I'll try this for a total of, so $55, $75. So it cost me easily less than $100 for the tools and the frets and the Graphtec nut. So to me, it was worth trying. I like doing stuff like this, and I thought, okay, well, it's worth trying it. If worst comes to worst, I could probably salvage the job that I did by taking it to a shop and having it finished. You know, once I had the frets in and had them leveled and everything was close, if I had real trouble getting the nut and getting the heights and everything, I thought, well, I could spend $20 on another nut and take it to a shop and have them just do the final work on it. But it seemed to work okay for me. But again, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't do this again on a nice guitar, on an expensive guitar. I think it's something that. But I think it is something that's worthwhile trying on a real crappy guitar. And if you're interested in doing it, I would even buy a couple of crappy guitars or a couple of crappy guitar necks and doing it yourself before you ever attempted doing it on a good guitar.